can't live in an RV, you can't live in a tiny house. And that's coming everywhere. It's California is the extreme, but that's coming everywhere. And I complain about it a lot, and I am upset about it a lot. And I realized we ushered this world in because we do not trust. We do not trust each other. We do not trust ourselves. So we've made a world where we need someone to tell us what minimum wage is, what is a fair wage. Two adults cannot decide. We've made a world where I need someone to tell me how tall my compost pile is so I don't start a fire, because we do not trust ourselves. We have stopped listening to the intuition, to the part of us that's connected to God, that is constantly whispering what's so. And this is different than your internal dialogue. Our internal dialogue is blah, 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 blah. And how you can know it's your internal dialogue and it's not your intuition? Your internal dialogue is rarely saying anything nice. It's mostly diminishing you and other people. And so that voice, that's not what I'm talking about. But we have to get back to learning to trust ourselves and trust each other and trust God, because we have ushered in this world where everything needs to be regulated because we do not believe that we can trust our own eyes. But we all have done it. We've all met someone and we're like, no, I don't want to do business with that person. And then something happens later and you're like, oh, glad I didn't make that mistake. But that's always, we always have that voice. We always have that guttural instinct. And so I'm going to share a story about trusting that guttural instinct in the most extreme possible circumstances, so that you guys can believe that I really believe that we need to do this. And some of you have heard this story before, and so I'm sorry for those of you that have already heard this story, but somewhere in my early 30s, I was on my father's farm in Northern California, and we were doing a land ceremony with a Oaxacan grandmother with mushrooms. And we were blessing my dad's land. I come from that kind of hippie family. That's what was happening. And I didn't think about it. I took the tea. I'm sitting there and I'm watching my uncle walk across the field. And I'm clearly hallucinating. He goes from being a man to curled over to an older man, and then he turns into a fetus. And then he turns from that fetus into a boy, a man, an old man, and I keep seeing as he's walking this cycle. And a voice says, you made a choice that was not yours to make. And I'm as liberal as they come. I'm a vegan chef in Los Angeles, grew up in upstate New York in Ithaca, the most liberal. They outlawed gas stoves there. I'm as liberal as they come, and I hear this voice and I think, this voice is telling me to be pro-life. That can't be possible. And I'm having this experience on mushrooms and I'm resisting. And if anybody's ever done plant medicine, the more you resist, the louder it gets. And so I go through this whole thing, and the voice with most unconditional love continues to ask me, do you believe in the divine? Yes. So do you believe in divine order? Yes. So how could you have made that choice? How is that your choice to make? Now, my perspective was, I couldn't even fathom that I wanted to be pro-life. That was crazy from the perspective. I grew up with a mother who had a few abortions while I was in high school. It was the abortion I had in my 20s, I treated it like a root canal. I never thought about it until that day. Never thought about it again. And so in that evening, it went on, and I resisted, and I resisted, and I resisted, and finally I said, what do you want from me? Promise to never do it again. Okay, I promise. And everything cleared up, all the darkness, all the hard. What else do you want from me? Promise to never encourage another person to do it. Okay, I promise. Never contribute financially, I promise. And I left that day. I never told anybody. I mean, in my family, in my world, that would have been crazy to even say it. And I just went about my life. And several years later, I was having a rough day. I had just broken up with my boyfriend. My ex-husband was having a hard time. His best friend had OD'd. They were both in the restaurant. They were both being jerks. And it was the first opening week of a big restaurant for me. And it escalated. I had to get my ex-husband's roommates to come get him, remove him from the restaurant. I went into the kitchen. I was crying. And a young man that had worked for me for a lot of years brought me a margarita. And I don't really drink. And I drank that margarita. And he said, "Let me go get you another one. You'll feel better." He drove me home that evening. And I slept with him. And I said, "Don't ever tell anybody sexual harassment. Never tell anybody that this happened." He didn't even speak English. There was 13 years between us. And I went about my business. And 2 weeks later, I didn't get my period. And I said, I went and I talked to him, and he was like, "I'm sorry, you're the boss." And I said, "Okay, we're going to get married. I promise God." We didn't speak the same language. He was here undocumented. Like how it looked in my community to say, "I'm going to marry this person in 2 weeks because the restaurant's closed for Thanksgiving. Let's get married." But I knew that I had promised God. And people said, "Mollie, it was a hallucination." When I was trying to explain it to people, it was a hallucination. It was the mushrooms. It was a hallucination. Well, that's not how it occurred to me in the moment. So even if it was, I promised God. But what the easier thing would have been to do, I promise you, I just opened this restaurant, I had all these investors, everybody looking at me. I wanted to look good. I wanted to be good and cool and look good. It would have been easy to just go and get another root canal and never think about it again. But that's not the path I chose, because I knew that I had promised God something. So I got married. People were like, "What?" I was like, "Come over, we're getting married on Thanksgiving. If you want, we're gonna have leftovers from the catering, and we're gonna get a Whole Foods turkey. So yeah, like, come over. Sarah's gonna make a cake." And people were like, "Well, who are you marrying?" Didn't you and George break up? Yes. And our vows were literally like, probably the community thinks this is crazy. I don't even know if he had vows. I don't remember, but I had some vows, and it was basically like, this looks crazy, but this is what we think is best.
Yep.
In January, I lost that baby.
Oh.
And everybody's like, "You got free. You did the right thing, and God freed you. You did the right thing, and now you're free. You can do it. And it's okay." And we were catering this big dinner for an Indian family. It was a 50th wedding anniversary of the matriarch, patriarch of this family. And they asked to have the cooks vegan food. So it was a big vegetarian family, and they asked the cooks to come out and meet the father and mother of this big patriarch, the matriarch, patriarch, this big, it was like a wedding. I mean, it was a huge, big thing we're doing. And we walk over, and somebody translates for my husband. I don't remember who, but I say, "This is it." And I asked them, "What would you say is the success of being married for 50 years? And they said, "Well, our marriage was arranged. And we didn't love each other in the beginning, so we're not looking backwards. We're building for the future every single day. So it's not about who he was when I married him and wishing him he was that. It's about who we're going to be tomorrow every single day."
Yay.
And someone translated that to my husband, and we went home that night, and he and I had a conversation that maybe the baby, a conversation via text message with Google Translate, that maybe the baby that didn't stick was there to arrange the marriage, and that we could choose something different.
Wow.
And now it's 10 years later. And here you are on our ranch. He's in the kitchen, busting the gas. But it took trusting in a way, trusting like that what I promised was the right promise. And trusting it wasn't easy. It wasn't like that first year, you think it was like, it wasn't like this awesome first year of marriage where we're just like so in love. Like it wasn't. It was hard. And we could only watch nature shows because there was nothing, like I couldn't watch any TV with a storyline. But the reality is, we learned to love each other over time, not because we loved each other so much the first time that we saw each other. But we're meant to be married to each other, and I'm clear that all the circumstances that came up to that point, all the things that had to align for that to be, he asked one time, what do you think is the statistical chances of a kid from Oaxaca coming and then marrying his boss and having 4 kids? I was like, really low. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the statistical chances are, but it's pretty low. But like, I'm the luckiest woman in the world. We're not perfect. We fight, argue, but we give each other grace. And we call the future, every day it's about creating a better future. Like every year of our marriage has been better than the year before. And so this is an example of trust in your own gut over your internal dialogue. And I believe that that level of faithfully trusting oneself at that level is what will usher in a new kind of not needing so much government in between each other. And that might seem like a far leap, but it's not. We don't believe our own eyes anymore. And so we don't know what's right. But the thing is, we already do know what's right. And so we think that story's over, right? But it's not quite over. So we have 4 children, we love each other so much. It's better, we got the farm. And then one day, we have a volunteer program during COVID. And one day, this kid shows up, high school kid, shows up on my farm with a mask on. I'm like, oh God, this kid with a mask. And he volunteers. I'm very, oh no, I'm not pregnant yet. I'm very busy. I don't know, I wasn't very present to the volunteers that day on the farm, but during COVID, we had volunteers that came every other weekend. And so we have a conversation, and when I finally see this kid, I don't know, I feel like I can see his soul. Like I just love him right away. And I say, hey, do you want to come on the weekends when we're not doing volunteers and work on the farm? Or, so he comes the next weekend, he rides with my vegetable truck to the farm. And he comes and he stays for the weekend and he's working. And then he's like, hey, what do you think about, it's distance learning, is it okay if I just stay and do school and then I can help more in the afternoons on the farm? And I said, sure. And then that leads to like, he never goes home, basically. I don't know exactly how many weeks it was until he just didn't go home anymore, but within a couple of weeks, he lived with us. And we then eventually adopted him. And I didn't want to say it out loud, but the whole time I'm thinking, that's the soul that I aborted.
Whoa.
That's my boy. And then finally, when I get the bravery to tell him, he says, well, you don't know, I Googled, like, can American food make me sick? And then I find Mark Hyman and I find your YouTube channel. And I'm watching your YouTube videos And I'm thinking, like, I feel connected to her. And so I got money and I took a cab and came to your farm so I could volunteer. And so that might not be true. It might be all made up to try to make me feel better about something I did, but either way, our family expanded and we got our 5th child. That was fun. But we had to trust, and he had to trust. He had to, all the circumstances of his life, all the circumstances coming from Guatemala, coming here, he had to trust us, come into our house, like assimilate into a family. He had to show up somewhere with a bunch of hippie white people on a regenerative farm and be like, okay, here I am. Like, he had to trust, and he made that one leap of faith, and that shifted the direction. And I have no doubt, I have no impact on the greatness of his life was going to be great. It's nothing, like, I don't take any credit for his greatness. He's like extraordinary and grew up most of his life without me. Like, I take no credit for that. But the path he's on right now is only because he trusted, like, I need to go meet that person that I've seen on YouTube, and I'm going to spend, he was in high school, $70 for an Uber is like kind of a lot of money to come out here. And we have to trust each other. And I don't know how to create that. And I don't know how to make people trust each other, because trust gets broken. And so it can't just be like I trust and then that person broke my trust, so now I never trust them again. And you can have profound trust with someone, and then it can get broken, and then we have to do the work to repair it. But trust is almost like the soil, like it's a living thing that has to be managed. So you have to check in, like, hey, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Does this still, And so in the kitchen right now, there's a woman, her name is Maria. She worked for me for 15 years, or 14, since she was 19, came to me as a prep chef, $8 an hour. She moved her way all the way up to be the kitchen manager of my biggest restaurant. Much of my success could be attributed to Maria's ability to save money. She's much more frugal than I am. Like, we could even argue that this ranch, being here right now, and there came to be a day where Maria wanted a raise. And it was COVID and restaurants are losing money, and I said, the only way I can give you a raise is you take a new role. You step out of the kitchen and you step into being a manager. She didn't want to do that. She left. She quit. The day she left, her whole kitchen walked out to that.
Whoa.
They came back the next day. But I was very pregnant and I had to go to work. And I went pregnant to work. My husband, we didn't close. We were not going to let that momentary upset close the restaurant. But I love Maria like a sister or a daughter, and it hurt me that she and I were not close anymore. 15 years, we worked over 13 years every day together. And I haven't spoken to her since this happened. It's like 6 or 7 months ago. And my husband comes out and he said, I can't do this without Maria this weekend. I said, you want me to text her? He said, yeah. And right now, in the kitchen, Maria's there. I texted her. She didn't even ask me, how much are you going to pay me? She didn't ask any questions like that. She sent me a picture of her driver's license. She got time off from her other job. And she's here. I haven't seen her in 7 months. But that's her and me repairing the trust that we have had for 13 years, that a momentary glitch messed up. But we have to be able to trust each other in this kind of way, and we have to do the work to keep trust alive. People will break our trust all the time. We will fall. Blanchard just said earlier, I can't judge anybody how he falls. It's how they get back up again. But we have to encourage each other to get back up again together. The overreaching government is a function of our inability, of our thinking that we need somebody between us. And we don't. If we are in touch with our guttural truth, and we're in touch with God. We don't need anybody in between us negotiating on our behalf. Because we're being led in every moment to do what we're meant to be doing. I was led here, and do you know that I've met 4 people? John, my ranch manager, said, I was led here. I have a neighbor over here, she said, I was led here. I don't know why everybody's, Heather was led here. People have been led to here where we are in Bandera. I don't know why, but I was led here because I was listening. And I don't know, I don't have the end of that story to tell you, the thing. We're just at the beginning of that story. So the beginning of why we're led here, you guys are the first patrons of this new big foolish project like Mollie. I don't think I'm going to give up complaining about the government, full disclosure. But I do think every time I hear myself complaining, I'm going to remind myself that the only way out of this is getting back in touch with, like, we're all connected and we have to trust each other, and that listening, don't do something that doesn't feel right. Don't do something that isn't, because we're being led in every moment. I was led to that mushroom ceremony so that I could have this life that I have right now. And that's crazy to think about it. And people say, well, do you wish that you hadn't have had what happened? Sure, I wish I hadn't have made that choice at 22 years old, but no, because that choice led me to that moment of excruciating conversation with God, which led me to the most extraordinary family and the most extraordinary life. And so it's all connected, and we have to listen. And we have to stop thinking that a piece of paper from the government is somehow going to protect us. Oh, one thing, I did not get a prenup. People were like, you're gonna marry this person that you don't love, that doesn't speak the same language as you, and that you don't know in that way without a prenup. And I was like, yeah, because then it's not, if I get a prenup, well, I'm not really committed. And so we can't think that that's gonna protect us. And I'm not gonna stop using contracts and blah, 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 blah. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to be people that don't need the government between us in order to get the government from in between us. So that's the basis of my talk. The last thing I want to say is I think radical community, and not radical like the radical right and the radical left, but I think that like community is the answer moving forward, and people say that all the time, but I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I live currently on a farm with 27 people, and I'm moving here, and the majority of those people are moving with me. And so I do think that when you look at starting a farm, or you look at starting some big thing, and you think about doing it by yourself, it's really scary. Doing it with people is still really scary. Don't think that I'm not scared, I'm terrified all the time. But I think bravery is being afraid and taking the next step. And the only difference between people that do things in the world and people that don't do things in the world is the people that don't do things in the world, when they're afraid, they think that that's that internal voice. Being afraid, the Bible says, how many, when you said it, like 360 times it says, don't be afraid, in some version of don't be afraid. It's because it's scary to be alive. So we can't let fear stop us. But none of us can do it alone. Radical community is the answer, because we're all living in a community. It's just your community might be the clerk at HEB and the driver from Amazon and the mailman and the thing, and you think you're doing it alone, but you're not. It's just a community that you're totally disconnected from that's making it happen for you. So whatever we do is going to do it in community. So I think it's time that we actually start to do this. And so looking and And lots of people will get on my Instagram and say it's easy for you to say you're rich or you're white or you're whatever reason. It's literally only that I'm willing to do this in community. I'm willing to do this with other people. The model of only paying people for as a commodity is bankrupt. And we're gonna still use it. I'm not saying that people aren't gonna pay it, but I'm saying that, like, me and my husband have been running the farm in California for how long? We have off-farm jobs, and then we come home, we work on the farm, and we pay other people to be on the farm, and then they all go leave the farm. And they pay rent, and then they pay a cable bill, and a cell phone bill, and an internet bill, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That money's getting all spread out. But if all those people that say were living on the farm, and there was an internet for the farm, and there was a one cell phone plan that everybody was just $10 because it's a family plan or whatever. There's so many ways that we spread out our money that's not necessary because we're afraid. Like, well, I can't trust myself. I can't put my cell phone and their cell phone on the same bill. It's not, oh, I don't have to trust them. And so, but you gotta realize that if you can't share a cell phone plan with someone, like, you're definitely not gonna share land with them. You're not gonna be able to share, you know, like, real things. So we should start by trying to think about how are we wasting money by being so separate. You ever fly on an airplane and you look down and there's like 73 swimming pools in a row and you're like, wow. They could have an orchard and one big swimming pool and it'd be awesome. But everybody has their own swimming pool. It's like a box and a box and a box. We have to learn how to share. We have to learn how to be in community, and it's not easy. Literally, Nick and me, leading up to this event, looked at each other 100 times when we just cleaned something up and it got messed up, or this and that, and something was moved, and we go, community. God bless community. Like, because we're just like, so, it can be confronting. I'm not saying, but we can't do this alone. Nobody can do farming, nobody can do really conscious community alone in this manner. So we have to find our tribe. And not everybody's gonna be your tribe, but we gotta find each other. And we gotta listen when you hear the whispers, because God will whisper and then he will scream. And so in 1 week, someone had came up to me and said, I have an opportunity for you to go to a restaurant in Austin. And I was like, oh, really? And then someone else was like, you know what, there's this regenerative project happening in Texas, and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then Blanchard comes over to my house, and I've never met him before, and he seems crazy because he says that the white redneck is the great hope to counterbalance communism in America. And I'm like, this dude is great. And then he goes, you gotta move to Texas. And I'm like, okay, well, you're like the third person this week to tell me to move to Texas, so I'm gonna fly to Texas. And that's how I started looking for land. But he was talking about like he was moving. Now it's been like years and I bought a farm and he's still in the same spot, not even looking at any land in Texas. So I'm gonna push him now. But my point is, that was a whisper. I had never met him before. He just showed up at my house with this other girl that I know. And I gave him a farm tour, and he said that, and I was like, it was the third person that week. And so I think we have to listen where we're being directed, where we're being led. And even when we came and looked at this land, we were totally set on this other land in Utopia. We were 100% going to get this other. We were going to put in an offer. And I woke up at like 4 a.m. and said, I think we need to go back to that place we looked at yesterday. My dad, I went downstairs, he was getting some coffee, making some tea, and he said, I think we need to go look at that place we looked at yesterday. And then when my husband woke up, he said, I don't think that place in Utopia is going to be able to grow food. I didn't like how the land was. Let's go back to the place we looked at yesterday. So we all woke up out of sleep with that. We're all being talked to. We're all being communicated. And so we have to be connected to that, to hear that. And so my request as we leave out of here is that you guys find your tribe, but also remember the government got how it got because we thought we needed them to protect us. We thought it was scary out there. And anytime that you hear your internal dialogue telling you to do something that doesn't have integrity, also the government got that way because people were doing stuff to each other that didn't have integrity. And so let's be the best cell in the body that we can be. Let's be lots of doctors that have much more terminology than me talked about different kinds of healthy cells this weekend. We're all a small cell in the world, and we can be not a cancer cell. We can be that most healthy cell that is propelling the world forward. And so that's my request, and that's what I hope that you guys go out into the world and do. I'm done with my talk. Does anybody have any questions? It's been a long week. Continue to talk and talk and talk.